Okay, I believe we are live and good to go. If you all can hear me, if someone just put that in the chat, that'd be great. Um, but anyway, welcome to our 2025 Dam Safety Grant Training for the Dam Safety Flood Prevention and Protection Assistance Fund. My name is Jake Shaw. I am the Grants Manager for the Division of Dam Safety here at DCR. We've got a full list of presenters today, and we'll get into that. But to start off, I'm going to turn it over to Mark Kilgore, our lead engineer, just to do some introductions about the program and our division.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So, and the next slide. Well, again, welcome to all of you. I'm Mark Kilgore. I've been with DCR since 2017, first as a regional engineer and now as the lead engineer, and hopefully soon to be joined by a chief engineer as we grow our program. The state's broken out into 5 regions, as shown here. And can somebody mute their background? We're getting a lot of kid noise. So yeah, the 5 regions are shown here, and you can see the identity of each of your regional engineers. And this is provided if you just Google DCR dam contacts, it'll come right up. Next slide. And the next slide.
Sorry, my slide clickers is not behaving.
There we go. I want the team slide so yes. I can use my team. That's the
there we go.
There we go.
Sorry.
So we're fortunate to have 2 of our regional engineers and our mapping engineer join us for the call, along with Charles Wilson, who works for the Soil and Water Conservation Division's Dam Safety Program. Andrea Henry has been with us a couple years now and used to be the dam safety manager in Austin. Justin Deals, a former Corps of Engineers dam safety engineer. Andrea and Justin are both based out of our Charlottesville offices. And Aaron is based here in Richmond, one of our 2 mapping engineers. Scott Peterson works with Jake Shaw, and then Victor Thornton is our data services manager. So those of you that are familiar with the DSPPAF platform, between Victor Thornton and Melissa Mamarian, they handle your requests for password resets and are always working with us to improve the efficiency of DSPPAF. Next slide. So these were just a couple of the housekeeping details that we had. We'll have the slides and the recording available afterwards, and the link is provided in the text here. If you want to take a photo or a screenshot of that. You can also type questions into the chat window, which is being monitored, and we're going to do our best to answer all the questions, but if there's 1 or 2 that stump us, we can easily add those to that same webpage presentation. We will invite attendees up to the stage to speak at the end of the training, just to provide more efficiency as we go through our presentation, since a lot of your questions may be answered in the transcourse of the presentation. Next slide. With that, I'm going to hand it over to Jake, who will give us an overview of the grants program. Thank you, Jake.
Yeah, thank you, Mark. As Mark said, we'll have Q&A at the end. We do have a small Q&A window built in the middle where we'll probably answer some of the questions in the chat proactively. But again, we'll if you want to come up and talk to us at the end, we'll have time for that. But yeah, as Mark said, I'm going to give a basic overview of the program on the administrative level before we get into the details. And again, I'm the grants manager for the division. So for this year, we have $5 million available in grant fundings total. That is split across 3 different grant categories: projects type 1, projects type 2, and projects type 3. 1 million of that $5 million is reserved just for project type 1s, which is the determination of hazard classification. And then the remainder of the funds will be for the projects type 2 and projects type 3, with priority given to high hazard dams. So some fundamental Project type 1 is open to any dam with an unknown hazard classification, and it includes previous recipients of our letters of engagement program. And then project types 2 and 3 are for dams of any determined hazard class. And again, reviewing favors high and significant classified dams. Project type 2 is for plans, specifications, engineering studies, and instrumentation. And the update is that we will fund instrumentation projects as of both this year and last year's grant round. Project type 3 is for repairs, safety modifications, and dam removal. So projects that make partial steps towards bringing the dam into compliance, and will accept design and build approach for dam removal projects as well. And here's just some basic definitions for the purposes of the grant program. We consider a local government or locality to be any county, city, town, municipal corporation, authority, district commission, or political subdivision created by the General Assembly or pursuant to the Constitution or laws of the Commonwealth, or any combination of two or more of these entities. Private entities mean dam owners, whether individuals, partnerships, corporations, or other non-governmental entities. This additionally includes, but is not limited to, homeowners associations, planned unit developments as defined in the Code of Virginia, and common interest communities as defined in the code as well. And then finally, maintenance means routine activities conducted by dam owners for preventative maintenance, such as removal of woody plants and trees, addressing rodent holes, replacement of parts, systems, or components, and other activities needed to preserve or maintain the dam that do not require an alteration permit. These grants do have a match requirement. All grants require a minimum of a 50% match, and this match can come from a combination of funding sources, including federal grants, so long as the fund does not contribute more than 50% to the total project costs. Projects must have commenced on or after July 1st, 2024, and end no later than 2 years after an executed grant agreement, up to 3 years with an approved extension. Grant funds are reimbursed on a reimbursement basis only after the project is complete and reviewed by our team here, and we'll get into the details of that later on. And now for the timeline. So as you all know, the application period began on December 15th, 2024. A grant manual was posted to the website, and applications are available to be submitted online via the DSIS portal. Applications are due on February 28th in DSIS by 4 p.m. Once we have received all the applications, we will then enter the review process with our regional engineers. And once the review recommendations are done, we will take it to the Soil and Water Conservation Board at their spring meeting, hopefully in April. Once the board meets and approves our awards, we will announce the awards hopefully in late spring or early summer. And with award announcement comes grant agreements, and the return of your grant agreement signed constitutes the beginning of your grant period of performance. So come winter of 2027, you'll be approaching the period of performance deadline, which is when you need to submit your 1-year extension request if you're pursuing that. And then project deadline will be in the summer of 2027, 2 years following the grant agreement. And then your reimbursement requests can be submitted within 90 days following the end of the project period of performance date. Okay, here we have a matrix of eligibility requirements. I won't read this verbatim, but it's in the grant manual and the slides will be sent out. It lists out the number of applications you are eligible to submit per category, certificate status, and any other requirements, such as for project types 1, the dam must be an undetermined hazard class. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to our regional engineer, Andrea Henry, to cover project types 1. Yeah, so let me know if you need anything, Andrea.
All right, thanks, Jake. Good morning, everybody. So I'm Andrea Henry. I'm the Region 1 Dam Safety Engineer. That's most of the counties in the Northern Virginia region, coming down the 29 corridor, so including Culpeper and Madison counties. I'm happy to talk with people outside of this meeting about their projects if you guys are in Region 1, and I can put my contact info in the chat after I'm done here. Okay, project 1. Oops. Can we get a mute? There you go. Okay, project 1, this is for only for dams that do not have hazard classifications. So this means you're a dam owner and you are basically starting from scratch. This could mean that you just purchased a property with a dam on it and are trying to figure out first steps, or maybe you've owned it for a while, but didn't know you had a dam or are ready to start your compliance journey now. So this is going to cover all of the submittals that you need to come in to either get a regular operation and maintenance certificate with the dam safety department. And that would mean if you have a regular certificate, you're in full compliance. Or to identify what else you need to get a regular operation and maintenance certificate. So that includes three things. Your dam break inundation study. So this is going to be a study that shows what happens in a variety of scenarios with your dam, whether it breaches in what we call a sunny day scenario. So there's no rain, but something's wrong with the embankment and it falls apart essentially, or in a storm event scenario. And then you create inundation maps. These are really important because these are what we give our emergency responders to show if this dam breaches, exactly who's going to be in danger. The second thing you need is once you have these maps, you take the maps and you develop an emergency action plan. This is something that will include the participation of local and state emergency responders, municipalities, and of course your professional engineer and regional engineer. And in addition, you need a professional engineer to do an inspection of your dam. So this is going to enable an engineer to identify any deficiencies with the dam that could potentially cause a breach scenario. Important things to note about these. Well, first of all, you have to have an unknown. If you've had work done in the past, if you've identified what sort of hazard classification you have, you're not eligible for this type of project. This is really a starting out type grant. You can apply for all of the eligible activities on this list, all three. However, they have to be separate applications with separate funding identified per activity. You need a professional engineer to put these together, and to be eligible for reimbursement for these, you need to, within the grant eligibility period, get a conditional or regular operation and maintenance certificate. And I think that's it for this one. Okay. Oh, FAQs. Oh, what's the average cost? So we do have awards on our website from previous years. I recommend looking at not just one, but several, especially when it comes to things like inundation studies. We have seen a variety of costs in the last few years. So you're going to want to look at more than one. Okay, let's see. After a P inspection. Okay, so yeah, so as we talked about, so the inundation study, that's the study that creates the maps that shows who's going to be in danger and where, and these breach scenarios. And based on what you find there, that determines your hazard classification. So that comes out of your dam break inundation study. And once you know your hazard classification, whether it's low, significant, or high, you then know what's required in terms of your spillway conveyance, in terms of PE inspection frequencies, all of that kind of stuff. Okay. Okay, certificates. Yes, a PE has to sign and seal the application for a certificate. That's going to be important for you type 1 applications, not before the application period, but during the grant period, you're going to need to get that. And if you are still looking for a professional engineer, you can contact me or any of our regional engineers, and we can provide you with a list to start from. Okay, I think that's it. Oh, there are more questions. Okay. Is the inundation study, that's what we call a DBIZ for short, required? It absolutely is. That's sort of the foundation for determining what you need to do to be in compliance for your dam. So that is where you want to start. We'll talk about this in a moment, but if you have potentially a low hazard dam, meaning there's not a lot going on downstream, maybe you're in a rural area, you may qualify for a DCR's Simplified Dam Break Inundation Study Program. So this is a subsidized program where you can get an inundation study for $2,000. And let's see. Okay. If developers build homes downstream of the dam, I'm not sure why this is in type 1, but okay. So we do have in our Dam Safety Act, we have requirements and procedures for when this happens. So potentially, if somebody was to develop a home in the inundation zone of your dam, it could change the hazard classification of your dam, increase the hazard classification, which means it could increase the requirements on you as a dam owner to be in compliance with dam safety regulations. So localities are typically the ones that get these plans. They are required to see if it's in an inundation zone. They're required to give these plans to DCR. We would look at these to see if it would change the hazard classification, and then work from there. So it's really the locality that is kind of the first eyes on this. Okay, I think we're
Sounds good
here.
Yes. Thanks, Andrea.
Uh-huh.
And with that, we're going to turn it over to our mapping engineer, Aaron Bish, to talk about the simplified mapping program.
Hi. So yes, if you have an I'm Aaron Bish. I'm a mapping engineer for the dam safety. If you have an unknown hazard dam, for a simplified mapping program for $2,000, you can perform a simplified dam break inundation study to determine if it is low hazard. So so yeah, we recommend before that you contact either me or your regional engineer to determine if your dam is a good candidate for a program. Because if a simplified mapping study determines that we find that the dam is significant or high hazard, the $2,000, then the simplified mapping won't count for the dam's DBIS, and the $2,000 fee that you paid is non-refundable. So this $2,000 fee is a lot lower than what a full DBIS study would cost. So it's a good idea to try to do this if you believe your dam might be low hazard.
Great. Thank you, Aaron. I think that's the only slide for the simplified program. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And with that, sorry to toss it right back to you, Andrea, but we have the project type 2 category to go over now.
All right. So type 2 grants. These are, in a nutshell, the work you need to do to receive an alteration permit from DCR. So you need an alteration permit anytime you're going to do significant work on your dam, for rehabilitation or remediation reasons, spillway alterations, all of that kind of stuff. So for this, we have $4 million available, but that's going to be shared between these type 2 grants, which are mostly in the design bin, and the type 3 grants, which are more in the construction bin. Okay, so here's a really important thing to know that differentiates type 2 from type 1. For type 1, you just need to know that in the future, you're going to need to get an O&M certificate to get reimbursed. For type 2, if you plan on applying for this and you don't have a professional engineer yet, I would recommend doing that very quickly, because not only do you need to put your application together, you also need to submit the what's going to be a conditional operation and maintenance certificate, which has to be done by a professional engineer. And you also have to submit a professional engineer inspection if there is not a current one. in our database. So there might be quite a bit of work in the next few weeks for your professional engineer to do to make you eligible for this type of project. And again, the goal here is that you are doing any of the work necessary to be able to submit an alterations permit to DCR. And we have to have that submitted and approved during that grant eligibility period for your reimbursement to occur. Let's see. And for these, so we do prioritize according to hazard class. So the high hazard class is going to get priority over a low hazard class. However, that should not prevent you from applying if you are if a significant or low hazard dam. It's just something to note. Okay, so this is some small print. So eligible activities, again, it's all these things that you need for your alteration permit. So it could be that you need a completely new inundation study, emergency action plan. That's always, you have to have a current emergency action plan, perhaps a temporary emergency action plan that's relevant just for the construction period to be able to receive your alteration permit. You might need to do some modeling in addition to a traditional inundation zone analysis if you don't have the current spillway capacity you need for your hazard classification. You may need some geotechnical investigation with earth and embankment dams to identify issues that are perhaps below the surface that you aren't seeing. And then you need to have, what construction plans for your alteration permit. And so something to note on this, alteration permits, construction that's eligible for this type of grant, these are rehabilitation projects, not deferred maintenance projects. So for example, if you have appurtenances or equipment on the dam that has met its lifetime, that has been damaged by a storm event or some event, that would be eligible. If you have trees growing on your dam and have for the last 40 years and want to remove them, that's more of a deferred maintenance issue, and that would not, although it may require an alteration permit to do that extent of work, it's not actually eligible for this grant. And then we have a list of things here that are examples of reasons you would need an alteration permit for your dam. Wave berm construction, if you have some erosion on the upstream embankment of your dam, looking at if you have seepage issues, if during that geotechnical investigation you see some things that you think need to be remedied and you want to put in filter drains, tow drains, chimney filter, all that kind of stuff, that's all eligible. Again, the spillway repair or upgrade, trash racks, those, often meet their lifetime. If you have a primary outlet that is corrugated metal, I bet you that's met its lifetime by now. So you might want to look into replacing that. Your low level drain, if that hasn't been operated in a long time and you think it's probably wiser to investigate and remediate versus open it and see what happens, right? And then not be able to close it. That is something that could be eligible. Erosion at the outlet, shoring that. So there are all kinds of different things. It's really, do you think it's a deferred maintenance issue, or do you think it's typical upkeep of the dam as things age? And you're certainly welcome to contact your regional engineer to run it by them if you are, before you submit your application. Okay, and then there's another thing in here for this project type, installation of remote monitoring systems. So this can cover the cost of the equipment. This can cover, I don't know if it covers installation or not. Does it? It does. Yeah, it covers the installation. It also covers 4 years of data transmission costs. So this is a really, if you're in a situation where you have a high hazard dam and your spillway doesn't necessarily convey what it's supposed to, those can be big costs, right? So maybe that's not something that you can remediate this year. Maybe you have a 5-year plan to fix that. Remote sensing can be really great emergency preparation strategy for you while you're sort of in this conditional phase where you're not compliant yet, but you have plans to be. And this can be really helpful for emergency responders as well. So this is also under the type 2 projects. Okay. Okay, so like I said, you've got to get your, probably it's going to be a conditional operation and maintenance certificate in as soon as possible. And you need to get, if you don't have a current PE inspection on file, you need to get that in as soon as possible, along with your application.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Andrea.
Yep.
I think that wraps up
All right,
much of
awesome.
type 2. And now we'll move on to Charles Wilson with our Soil and Water Conservation Division, who's going to present on the remote monitoring systems. So Charles, feel free to take it away, and I'll change slides for you when you need them.
All right. My name is Charles Wilson. I am with Soil and Water Conservation, and I'm the district dam engineer. And so while I'm an employee of DCR, I'm not necessarily under the dam safety umbrella. I'm kind of on the other side of the house. And they have, dam safety's kind of reached out to me because I've been working with the soil and water conservation districts on getting remote monitoring systems installed on their dams. So I'm trying to give you guys some insight to what to expect, things to think about, and also costs to consider if you want to apply for the type 2 plan to cover these systems. Next slide, please. Okay, we actually have 2 types of equipment, and they're kind of common on the market. They're, what I call the cellular equipment and satellite, and we're going to focus on the cellular equipment first. Next slide. The unit that we use is a onset micro RX water level station. And as you can see, it's, there's a picture of it. They're kind of really simple devices. They're really easy to use, and basically you just have to put the white box, which is the brains of the unit, where it actually, records the data, transmits the data and all that, somewhere that won't get wet during a high water event. And then you have to somehow get your sensor in the water to measure your water level. There's various different ways to do it, and you can kind of look into it, but these are kind of your simplest system. And the only downside to these is you have to be somewhere that has a cellular connectivity to report the data. This vendor also makes stuff that if you're close to your own house, you can actually piggyback off your own internet and do it that way. Next slide. Typical installation for a setup like this is you basically have the equipment, you kind of have a mounting pole, which is where you mount the unit to. You can do some buried conduit to get the cable from the sensor to the reporting unit. We kind of put in some valve boxes so we can access the stuff that's buried. We also have an intake pipe, and it's pretty a simple installation. Next slide. And this kind of shows our standard installation on our dams, where we just basically kind of put these at the middle of the dam. We have the pole close to the crest, but not really on it, so as to give us room for maintenance and access. And we just kind of run it down into the water. Next slide. Here's a picture kind of showing how we put some of these in, and basically it's pretty straightforward. Most earthwork contractors who know how to, put buried pipe can do it with a ditch witch. So it's nothing too terribly complicated, and that's one of the things we liked about this approach was we were able to buy the equipment pretty quick and get it in the ground pretty quick. Next slide. And that's kind of what the unit looks like, just in the field, and it's just kind of doing its thing. Next slide. That right there is kind of where it goes from the dry to wet. You can see our valve box where we actually have our sensor set there so we can access it for maintenance. And then we just have a pipe out in the water that kind of back feeds into the vault. Next slide. To give you an idea, these are kind of the costs we were looking at different districts around the state. And as you guys know, is dependent on where you're in the state, kind of alters your costs. So depending on, how fancy you want to get with your installation, you're looking at anywhere between $10,000 to $5,000 or even less. I think Blue Ridge, which is Henry County, was 2,500 per installation. So that just kind of gives you an idea of the cost. Now, these costs were a couple of years old, so you may need to adjust for inflation. Next slide, please. One of the advantages of these units is you can access your data online, and this is just an example of the website interface where it kind of gives you the information on your dam and how you can keep track of it. So next slide. And the really nice thing about these is because it is recording data all the time, you get nice graphs of what your lake level does pre and post storm. As an engineer, I find these highly valuable. And as a dam owner, you might find them valuable because it gives you an idea of how your dam's going to respond to different storm events. Next slide. If you have multiple dams, you can set up different dashboards with this cellular system, and it kind of tells you how close you are to your different emergency action triggers. Next slide. And the big key of these is we all know emergencies never happen during times when you're there. So this will let you know, they'll send you both email and text notifications whenever a trigger's hit. So as you can see on that email notification for that one, getting emails at 4 a.m. in the morning aren't optimal, but it can definitely give you that head start on an emergency if it's happening at your dam. Next slide. So that kind of covered your cellular one. And like I said, unless you're in somewhere with a lot of infrastructure and you have a good cellular connection, those are what I would call your less expensive alternatives. The next tier up is your satellite remote monitoring equipment. And we're kind of leaning towards this because it typically, no matter where you are, you'll get a good signal and you don't have to worry about that connectivity issue that you might have to with the cell towers. Because if anything with cellular is sometimes, for whatever reason, a place you had a signal last month, you might not have this month because they're doing tower maintenance, and you never want that to happen during an emergency for your remote monitoring equipment. So with that, we'll get into the satellite remote monitoring equipment. Next slide. The vendor we use for these is AMCI Wireless. They do the set alarm monitoring units. You can check them out online with that when you go back and look through the slides if you care to. Next slide. If you're a locality, you can actually go through colonialscientific.com for these. They're actually a vendor that can provide these through the procurement cut sheet stuff, and that's actually how we're obtaining these for the districts on our end. So I just wanted to share that with you because procurement is always the fun part for government entities. Next slide. Installation is basically the same thing, but the little difference with these units is they actually run the sensor to the bottom of the lake, and it does require specialized installation from the vendor because they have to aim, calibrate, and tune the satellite uplink connection. So these are a little more specialized, and you actually have to have someone who knows what they're doing and install them. Next slide. This kind of shows a very similar setup, how they do them. And it, basically anytime you do these, you're going to end up having to, put some kind of conduit in the ground to get the sensor in the lake. Next slide. The project costs with these, as you can see, kind of get a little higher, and the kind of things you're going to have to do is the programming. You buy your cable, your pressure transducer, your panel, and installation. And we were looking at an average cost of about almost $1,400 per unit. Now, depending on the size of your dam, you can imagine, if you have less conduit, it'll be less. If you have more conduit, it'll be more. So, but that just kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking at for getting these in the ground. Next slide. We also had options with this vendor to do additional things, which include rain gauges and cameras. If that's something you're interested, it's an option, but I will say, as much as the camera sounds cool, the resolution leaves a lot to be desired. So you should factor that into whether you want to get a camera or not. Next slide. The website interface is a little same, but a little different. And basically you can kind of see, it just shows you the water level. And I'm actually been getting alerts for our rain today and been kind of keeping an eye on some of those units now. Next slide. This is an example of the unit installed, and this was actually during a high water event that this unit kind of allowed us to track the dam, because we were getting a little concerned that our emergency spillway might activate. And if that happened, it was getting very serious. And because we had this unit on site, we were actually able to follow it and keep tabs on it a lot easier than if we had to just spend 24/7 out there measuring the water level rising like you would do without this kind of equipment. Next slide. And as you can see here, that's kind of an example of what it looked like before the storm for that previous picture. And you can kind of see if you have these units, you can definitely get a lot of information that's very helpful in terms of your emergency action response to storm events and high water events. All right, next slide. And as with the other units, you can definitely get, that email and text messaging notifications to whoever needs to know about them. Next slide. While you go into that, the thing with these units is those are your upfront costs. You also have the long-term cost. Next slide. And the big one is the data plan. And with the type 2, I think they said you can have up to 4 years data plans, and that is valuable. With your cellular, you're looking at $300 a year, which isn't all that bad. But if you're somewhere where that's not an option and you have to go to the satellite, the big cost with the satellite is you're looking at $100 a month. So as you can imagine, you're looking to $1,200 to $1,300 a year just for that plan to report. Other long-term costs that we haven't gotten into yet, but you just keep in mind is, some of these do have rechargeable batteries in them you'll have to replace sometime in the future. Your pressure transducers and sensors might become bad or foul depending on where your unit is. And the actual unit itself is kind of out there on your dam. And I don't know, depending on where you're at, knock on wood, we haven't had any hunters decide to try to shoot it to see what's inside of it yet. All right, next slide. With that, I think I'm done on that.
Yes, you are. Thanks, Charles. That was great.
Just one point is those are just two of the vendors that we use internally here. There are several other vendors and solutions on the market that are used around the state, but those are the only two that I have personal experience with. So just because they're ones we use, don't feel like those are the only ones out there. Just wanted to throw that out there.
Great. Thank you. So we have time for a brief Q&A from the chat before we move on with the rest of the presentation. It looks like most of the questions that were put in the chat have been answered. Just doing a read over now. Tina Marie, I believe that's you as general manager. I see you asked if it was 1,400 versus 14,000. I'm pretty sure the slide said it was close to 14,000, not 1,400. But correct me if I'm wrong, Charles. And
I think I just misspoke. Whatever the slide said is what it
okay,
was.
sounds good. Cool. Yeah, it looks like all of the other questions in the chat have answers. If you have anything you want to ask pertinent to the slides we've gone over thus far, feel free to drop it in there and we can keep answering them. But otherwise, I suppose we will proceed with the next part of the presentation, and then we'll have the bid Q&A at the end. So up next is, let's see, it's Justin Deal to talk about project type 3. So take it away, Justin.
Okay, thank you, Jake. Good morning, everyone. Project type 3 is the repair, safety, and removal cost share. Sorry about that. I'll silence my phone now. Forgive me. It shares in the $4 million of available funds with project type 2, and it also is a 50% cost reimbursement grant. Some eligible activities are I'm not going to go through all of these, but just various issues that are common in dams, such as stability analysis maybe showed that the dam is potentially unstable, settlement seepage, spillway design, flood capacity issues, if your spillway is not capable of passing the required spillway design flood, seismic failures, basically the whole gamut of there's a large variety of things that it covers, including the removal of an unsafe dam. Depending on the hazard classification and whether you're private or a local government, the maximum amounts do vary, and also what the status of your resulting O&M certificate after the project, whether that would leave you with a regular certificate, meaning you've met all requirements, or if potentially you still have other things hanging out that you would still be under a conditional certificate. So that's a pretty big difference if you take a look at the table, and I believe that's also in the grant manual and will be on these slides. Next slide, we can go through some of the requirements. So these are for established dams that have an operation and maintenance certificate on file, an approved inundation study with hazard classification. This says you need an approved plans, but I believe the grant manual, Jake, if I'm not mistaken, you just have to have your plans submitted by this past January 15th.
Yes, that is correct. Sorry about that.
That may be language from last year. So yeah, if you haven't submitted a plan before that deadline of January 15th, you wouldn't be eligible for this year. Obviously, after completion of the project, your engineer is required to submit a record report. It just states that the project was completed per plan. And the total project maximum is based on the resulting operation and maintenance certificate status. So whether it's regular or conditional, which I covered previously. Deferred maintenance projects are not eligible. Like if it's for tree removals would be an example. If for whatever reason the dam has been overgrown with mature trees, that would be considered deferred maintenance and wouldn't be eligible for this project type. I think that's pretty much it for this.
Yep. Great. Thanks, Justin. Yeah, so next is we have some screenshots from the application checklist. This is included in the grant manual, and I won't read it word for word, but this is essentially the both a list of required components of your scope of work and narrative that we'll be looking for. And then we also have the scoring criteria. So again, 2 different slides. One is just eligibility for what you need, and then these documents show you how those will be ranked and scored on the competitive basis. So again, I won't read through this step by step since it's in the grant manual, but if you all end up having any questions about the scoring criteria, again, feel free to ask and we'll answer them. And then one more slide about scoring criteria. But again, we'll send out these slides and it's in the grant manual. Okay, and then with that, we are now moving on to the dam safety inventory system where the application will actually be made. So I will turn it over to the DSIS team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Memarian, and I am the help desk in charge of DSIS. So when you are emailing DSIS, I'll be the main person that's responding to your emails. So let's get started. Next slide, please. So today I'll be assisting in how to fill out the DSIS application access form. And there will be a slide at the end with several web addresses on it that will show where to find this document as well as other supporting DSIS documentation. Next, please. So there are 2 levels of access that you can be granted for DSIS users. The first one is participant, which allows users to view, upload, download, and submit information for a specified dam or dams. And you can also apply for and submit key regulatory documents with participant access. This type of access requires a dam owner or owner representative signature, however, for you to be able to request access. Read-only access is for viewers that just want to view specific dams or regions without being able to edit the information in DSIS. And you must specify in this section of the form which dams or regions you would like to access. Next slide, please. Okay, so now I'm just going to briefly go over the different sections of the form. This first section requires the primary account user to provide their user information in order to set up their account. Please make sure to also include your email address in this section so that your DSIS username and temporary password can be emailed to you. There's also a section for additional comments if you feel like you need to provide any. Next slide, please. So continuing on down the form, the initial access section of the form requires users to check one box only to indicate if you would like to create a new account or if you'd like to modify, disable, or re-enable an existing account. The role access section of the form requires users to check one box only to indicate if you're trying to create a read-only account or participant account. And please make sure to check one box only for each one of these sections. Next slide, please. In this section of the form, you'll need to record the inventory number and dam name for each dam you would like to be added to your read-only or participant account. And if you feel like you need to attach a separate list for more dams, please feel free to do so. Next slide, please. So if you're not sure which dams you would like to add to your account, you can also request regional access instead of listing the dams individually. But please note that for participant access, you cannot be provided access to an entire region or regions. Only read-only access can be provided for this request. Next slide, please. So this section is for dam owners and representatives who are requesting participant access. These users must check their relation to the dam or dams listed or regions checked. Now, if you are a dam owner requesting participant access, your name, signature, and date is required at the bottom of page 2 of the access form. But if you are an owner representative or consultant, you must provide the dam owner's name, signature, and date in this section of the form, as well as your own name, date, and signature at the bottom of page 2. Now, if you are a public entity, meaning you're just requesting read-only access, you only need to provide your name, signature, and date at the bottom of page 2. Next slide, please. So this section of the form displays the access terms, conditions, and disclaimers that everyone should read in order to gain access to the DSIS website. Obviously, I'm not going to read all this to you, but it's on the form, so please make sure to read it. Next slide, please. And upon reading the terms, conditions, and disclaimers, the applicant must provide their full name, signature, and date in the last section of the DSIS access form. And once your form is complete, you can either submit your application by email, which is definitely preferred, to dsis@dcr.virginia.gov, or you can also mail your application to the Department of Conservation and Recreation's address that's listed here. Next slide, please. This slide provides the web addresses for DSIS's main, for the DCR main DSIS information website, as well as any links to supporting DSIS documentation. And also, as I mentioned, the DSIS access form itself. Next slide. And I believe that's it.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
And I believe next is Victor Thornton, our data services manager.
Yep. So I'm going to follow up with what Melissa just talked about for access. I'll go over the DSIS application, kind of like a brief overview of the website, and then we'll drill down a little bit deeper into the grant application submittal process. You can go next slide. So DSIS is a user access website, so you will need a username and password to access the website using the process Melissa just outlined. Once you do have your username and password, with that Melissa will email to you, you would use this URL to get to DSIS. Next slide. So upon entering DSIS, you'll see the dam search grid, dam search tab. This tab is specifically just to give you an overview of the dams you have access to. So in the screenshot, you probably or most likely won't have this many dams. Most people only have one or two, but all the dams that you do have access to in either your participant or read-only account will be viewable here. So it's just basic information about the dam, its inventory number, its name, the region, hazard classification, things like that. You can also get a summary report for all your dams by right-clicking the dam that you have access to and hit summary report. It'll download a PDF document that you can just have locally, and it's just a bunch of general information about the dam, much more information that's just on this grid. Next slide. The next tab is the application search. So this application queue is for most of the application, and this is not all. This will show you where your grant, or sorry, not your grant, where your application is in the workflow. One thing to note here, this queue does not show you approved applications. It's meant to be an actionable sort of an actionable application thing. So you only see things that haven't been approved. If you want to see things that have been approved, you'll need to go to that application itself. I'll show you that in a minute, but this will show you the status, so whether or not something's submitted or in development, and the dates associated to it for all the dams that you have access to. Yeah, next slide. So once you click into a dam, on the left-hand side, you'll see a list of options for each dam. We broke these up into three main categories: basic information, mapping, and regulatory applications. So the basic information is outlined in green here. That'll have anything from, where the dam is located, its lat long, events, the context for this, and basic technologic and hydrology information, also the attachments and history for the dam. The next section is the mapping. So we have two maps for each dam. We have just the map and then the emergency map. The first map is more of the catch-all general map that has a long list of GIS layers in the map, political boundaries, county boundaries, hydrology, dam information, sort of the catch-all, more general thing about the map or about the dam. And then the second is the emergency map. That one is way smaller, it's more streamlined, a lot less layers, and it's pulling in information from the last emergency plan. So this emergency map, is more for emergency operations. The last section are regulatory applications, is sort of the bread and butter. These are where all the applications for the dam are going to live. So you have the inundation studies, emergency plans, inspections, certificates, permits, and then grants. And that's where you would find all the applications, whether or not they're approved or not, within those tabs. Next slide. So we're just going to go through a few highlights of tabs. So the events tab will show you the upcoming expirations and incoming inspections. If you hit next one more time, I think there may be some text that shows up. Yeah. So DSIS also sends out reminders for upcoming expirations, but you can also see them on the events tab here. Okay, next slide. So contacts, this is a very important tab. So email notifications will go out to the dam owner for all the applications when something is submitted. The way DSIS knows who to email is using this contacts tab here. So you see in the first screenshot, you can see the owner and the contact type and the email address that comes in the details. So if you want to look at the details, you would right click any of those records in that contacts grid. It would bring you to that second screenshot. And where that green circle is, that's where the email that we would use if this person is the primary dam owner. You want to make sure that it's the primary email. You can add multiple emails. You can add multiple addresses and phone numbers. For the emailing system, you want to make sure it's the primary email for dam owner to make sure you receive the notifications. So you can view these things with the read-only, and the participants can also edit the contacts and add new contacts. So next slide. So if you want to add a new contact, you have two options. If it's not already in the dam, you have two options. You can add a contact from DSIS sort of a global address book. So this contact would probably have already been added at some point in the past. And you can add them once you hit the add contact there. It'll show you this grid. You can search by full name, organization, email, or even phone number. You would select them. You can hit next maybe 2 or 3 more times. Let's do 2 more times. Yeah, there you go. So you select them where that red box is there, and then just hit add contact. Then you'll be prompted with a pop-up, that second screenshot there. You'll have to indicate the type and the primary. So if this person's the owner, you would select owner. And if they're the one who should be getting the email, you would select primary. So this is the first option. You can also create a new contact using the second button, is add new contact, and that will completely add a whole new contact into the DSIS system. Please check first just to see if that contact's already been added. Oftentimes they are, and because you can always add a new contact, but there'd be no need to have 2 of the same person in the address book. So it's always a good rule of thumb just to check to see if that person's in DSIS. But if not, you could add a new contact, and you would just need to add in all the appropriate information for that user, and then they will be added to this dam once you hit add. Next slide. Okay, so getting into the grant application itself. So all the grants can be viewed here on this grant tabs on your dam. To add a grant, you will want to hit that add grant button. It's the green check mark. There's only one grant right now in DSIS. It's the Dam Safety Floodplain Protection Assistance Fund. You would select whether or not you're a private or public entity. And right now there's only one project category, which is dam safety. So this one's pretty easy. You really just need to select your application type, whether you're private or public. And then you hit add grants, and that will bring you to the next slide. So you can hit next one more time. So at this stage, you'll type in all this information. All the required information is indicated with a red asterisk. So it's all of these fields. We recommend using some sort of word processor or notepad simply because at this stage, DSIS won't save your information. So if you accidentally close the browser, lose an internet connection, something, having it on something else, you won't lose your work. So you'll need to type in the budget narrative, project type, scope, the total cost, total amount requested, and the contacts for this grant. Now you can hit next. So I'm not going to go through each and every slide. We added some slides here to help give examples of budget narratives and fields so that you would have an idea of what to put in to these fields. But if after looking at this, you're still not sure, always feel free to reach out for the grant information. Feel free to reach out to the grant team or your regional engineer for your dam if you're unsure of what to put in each one of these fields. Next slide. Yes, these are just the project types, so it's going to be a drop down. And all the project types we've been discussing in this will be here, and you'll just need to select the appropriate one for your individual dam. Next slide. So the cost fields, you don't need to type in any commas or dollar signs. You just need to type in the amount equals the rest. The context question, this is an important one. So the primary owner will get the email, but if other individuals should be getting emails about notifications on this grant, feel free to add those individuals here on the context field. You can add multiple, and whatever their email address, primary email address is for these contacts, those are the email addresses that DSIS will email when things change about this grant. For example, if a regional engineer needs revisions or whether or not something got submitted, these are the people who would get those notifications. Next slide. Project scope. Here's another example for the project scope. We're going to go too deep into this one as well, but this is here for your reference. Next slide. Okay, so once you filled out all those questions, you have some certification questions you'll need to answer to move forward. Spoiler alert, you'll need to answer these questions in this way to move forward for eligibility for grants. So definitely read through these questions and make sure this applies to your grant. If you answer it in any other way, it won't let you continue. If you do answer it in this way, you'll see that pop up at the bottom left. You'll need to hit continue application to continue. If you hit cancel, it will close out of everything and you will lose your work. So once again, super useful to have what you're writing down somewhere else so that you don't have to redo anything. Next slide. So these are the next questions that pop up. This is just to show you what the options are. I'm not going to go through each one, but they are all required, as you can see with that red asterisk. Next slide. And this is just the last question on there as well. I believe that's, yeah, this one's also required as well. Once you've finished all that, you can hit add. Yep, next slide. Keep going. And maybe twice more. There you go, that's good. So once it's added, it's automatically added in the development status. This is the spot where you're sort of good. You're not going to lose any of your work. The development status is sort of like your draft mode. So you'll be able to go in development and edit this as much as you want. Please know we're not reviewing development applications, but development is very useful for you to sort of save your work, come back to it, edit it as you need it, and then submit it. So to submit, you will need to use the dropdown. That first field there, it's a dropdown. You want to change it from development to submitted, and then just hit save at the top right. Once you do that, it will submit it, and you know that we're also reviewing it. Another good way to know that something got submitted is to check your email, because once something gets submitted, the email notifications go out to you and the regional engineers, letting them know that this is ready to be reviewed, and also an email to you, the dam owner, or if you were on that contacts field, that we have received the grant application and we are currently reviewing it. So make sure you get that email notification, and also check the grants tab to make sure it is no longer says development, it says submitted. Okay, next slide. And then lastly, you can, hit next one more time, I think. That should be good. So this is the attachments tab on that grant applications. This is where you would add any supporting documents for the grant, but it's also where DSIS creates its auto-generated documents for the grant. So check here for any information that the DSIS created. In many cases, it will also attach it in emails. But if you didn't get the email, you can also check the attachments tab for the grant. And next slide. And lastly, this is just how to contact us. So you are not wanting for people to reach out to if you have questions. If you have any issues with DSIS itself, the application process, maybe you see an error message, something's grayed out, you can't see something, can't find something, reach out to the DSIS help desk. That's that middle email, the dsis@dcr.virginia.gov, and we will help you out with your access. Also, if you have trouble just getting into the website, that's where you would that's who you would contact. If you have questions about the grant itself, the grant period, or details about grants, email that dam@dcr.virginia.gov. That goes to the grants team. And also, if you have questions about the dam or the grant itself, reach out to your regional engineer. That contact information will depend on where your dam is. I believe the hyperlink goes to the map where you see either the map or our website, which shows you the regional engineer's contact information. So a lot of people to reach out to, and don't feel pressure to get to the right person. We all know each other. We'll make sure your question gets to the right person so we can help you out. Okay.
Awesome. Thank you, Victor. Oops. So next, we're going to move into grant awards and reimbursement processes. These will be, more relevant on the back end after you receive your award, but good information to have up front. My teammate Scott Peterson is going to be taking us through this process. So, Scott, it's all you.
Thanks, Jake. So as prefaced by Jake, this is the metaphorical finish line. So you've applied for, received your grant, done the work, and now you're looking to get your money reimbursed. And so that's what this part of the process is devoted to. So Jake, next slide. So this is our team. Jake's our grants manager. I'm Scott Peterson, and along with us is Kevin Dotton, who you'll be corresponding with if you're doing reimbursements. And we have a vacancy right now, which was once held by Kim Gaines, who was here for many years. So many of you have probably interacted with her in the past, but she's since moved on. So looking to fill this vacancy at some point. Next slide. So the basics are that all the period performance for these is 24 months, and all these projects are eligible for a 12-month period of performance extension. For extension requests, you'll just email those to the dam@dcr.virginia.gov inbox that we've referenced many times. The DSFP grant funds will be dispersed on reimbursement basis. This was covered up top as well after the project's been completely done and approved. And reimbursement requests should be submitted within 90 days of the authorized project completion date. Next slide, please. So what to submit? So this is kind of a laundry list. If you have questions about any of these things as you're getting ready to submit, please send us an email. You can just direct it to the dam@dcr.virginia.gov inbox, and they'll get directed to the correct person. But I'll cover this list. Completed and signed Exhibit E reimbursement request form, a signed Exhibit D form of requisition, a certificate of the consulting engineer form, and we need this signed by the DCR regional engineer. This is to ensure this is the communication between the engineering team and the grants team that the work was done to the work of the project satisfies the engineering side of things, and that's how we know that the project is eligible for reimbursement. All invoices associated with the project, Oftentimes we get just a final invoice, but we really need to see every invoice that was associated with the project. They should be detailed enough so that we can kind of disaggregate different the reimbursement eligible work from other work that may be performed. Oftentimes, whatever project you're working on that is associated with a grant, there might be other work billed on that invoice, and we just need it to be clear that so we know what to look for. Then proof of payment of these submitted invoices, and this can take the form of canceled checks, redacted bank statements, or accounting system reports. Really, the key pieces of information we're looking for is the payee and the payor names, the payment posting date of the billing, the transaction and check numbers, and the amounts. And then optionally, if your reimbursement is a little complex and doesn't really fit into like the normal reimbursement packages that we see, just provide a little bit of narrative or a table kind of explaining the costs and the connections between the proof of payment documents and the invoices. That'll help expedite things for us. So next slide, please. These are just screenshots of what you'll submit. These will all be included with your in your grant agreements. They should all be in the grant manual as well, at least samples of them. The first is your letter of requisition, Exhibit D, and this is important to us because this is the number we're going to check against. So this is the number you're asking for in reimbursement, and we're just going to do the financials on the back end and make sure our numbers match the number that you've requested. The second form is the certificate of the consulting engineer. Again, this lets us know that the work was completed to the satisfaction of the DCR engineer, and that's how we know that we can disperse payment, everything kosher on the engineering side. Next slide, please. This is Exhibit E. This is just kind of a general information form, but nonetheless needs to be filled out and signed. Ask some questions about the work performed, and you'll just enter in it's mostly general contact information on that first page. So next slide, please. Okay, so here's some examples of what we would call a detailed invoice. It's got an invoice date and number. It's got a project number. It's got the services rendered, and this is important to us because oftentimes you'll be awarded a handful of grants, whether it's a DBIZ and an inspection and an EAP. We just need to see, for our purposes, to see where the money was spent on each of these, so we can kind of disaggregate them. And then finally, the billing amount, and we really need to see each of these invoices. Oftentimes, we can see the aggregate spend in each of these categories, but for our auditing purposes, we just need to have every invoice that was associated with the project to scrutinize. So next slide, please. This is the first example of proof of payment. It's a redacted bank statement. It's got the payer name, as we referenced up top, the payee name, the posting date of the payment, the check number, and the amount. So next slide, please. This is an example of an accounting system report. Again, it's going to have all those key components: payee name, payer name, amount, check number, and a post date. Next slide, please. Finally, we've got a canceled check. It's got a check number, a post date, an amount, payer name, payee name. More or less, we're just trying to ensure that the work that was billed was paid for by the person who was awarded the grant. So next slide, please. So this is a common trip up that we see oftentimes, is the difference between a canceled check and a copy of a check. A canceled check is basically confirmed by the banking institution that it's been paid to the actual engineering firm. And a copy of a check, we have no idea whether this was written out and then thrown in the trash, or actually cashed by the engineering firm. So that's why the former is really the standard that we go by. Next slide, please. So there are two ways of submitting. The preferred method is to email your packages to the dam@dcr.virginia.gov inbox, or if you are I guess a supporter of the Postal Service, you can mail everything to the address below. This should be listed in your grant agreement as well, so no need to hastily write it down. But again, the easiest method to get these things to us, and the way that they're going to get to us the fastest, and you'll get the fastest response on these things, is emailing them to the dam@dcr.virginia.gov inbox. All right, next slide, please. And that does it.
Yep. Thanks, Scott. So that was great. Yeah, I'm just going to do sort of a wrap up and overview, some key takeaways before we move on to our Q&A. We saw this slide earlier, but just a reminder about the timeline. Again, grants are open as of December 15th, and the application deadline is February 28th. And then once again, we're hoping for announcements of awards in late spring, early summer, based on when we can get the results to the Soil and Water Conservation Board. And again, 2-year period of performance, which would mean that your project deadline would end, in late spring of 2027. And if you're going to put in for an extension, please do that 120 days prior to the expiration of the grant. Yeah, so notification will be an initial email from us with an award letter. I believe DSIS will probably send you an announcement as well. That award letter will just be your notification that you have been approved. We still need to go through the process of getting grant agreements formed with the Virginia Resource Authority. So the formal start of your grant application or your grant period of performance will be when you've returned the fully executed grant agreement, which usually follows a few weeks behind the award letter. We do have some resources on our website. You can see a list of all of the previous awards. Our 2024 grants are also recently up there, so it's even more updated than this. You can see all the awards that have been submitted in the past and approved, their applications and their allocations, so you can have some good sources for price estimates and types of activities that have been funded in the past. We also have a grant resource folder, which can be accessed by that hyperlink. It'll just include these slides, the grant manual, any, the regional engineer contact information, anything you might need regarding the grant process. And then finally, again, here is our map of our dam safety regions. These are your best contacts for technical questions regarding your grant application or project. Between the regional engineer, my team, and the DSIS team, we should be able to get everything answered for questions that you may have. I have Victor and Scott's emails here, but we also had the DSIS email address up and the dam@dcr.virginia.gov email up as well. The dam inbox is the best way to get contact for the dam safety on the grant side. It'll be channeled to the right person with the most expertise to answer those questions. And I'm also going to drop my email in the chat just so you have it. You can always reach out to me about questions about the grant process. And with that, I think we're now ready for Q&A. So yeah, I think we have questions in the chat that were being answered while presenters were speaking. But at this point, if anyone wants to come off mute, ask questions, we're here to do so. And if your question didn't get answered in the chat, we can also circle back to that. So yeah, floor is yours if you want it, to our attendees. Yeah, we're here.
I'll start it off.
Okay.
I'm with Dan with Mass Resort. So project 2 is the study. So say we have a leaking valve that's not been operating, it's leaking. That would be the study to figure out what that needs to fix that, correct?
That sounds correct to me. Do any of the engineers on the call agree? Or?
Yep.
That's exactly right. It could include, underwater investigation, anything you need to get your design plans in order. It could include preparation of a, temporary emergency plan during construction if you have to dewater the dam at all. So anything you would need for that alteration permit.
Andrew, it would also include design plans if required to implement.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
right. Okay.
Yeah.
I just want to make sure. Okay.
And then there was 2 parts to that question. So that's the study. And then then the repair, I would have to wait after the study's done. So then I would ultimately have to wait to next year to put in for a grant to do the repair.
That's right, because at this point you've missed that January 15 deadline. But you know, you can go back and look at our previous grant manuals. I mean, they've been pretty consistent for the past number of years. So, you know, it's a decent chance that a lot of this is going to be exactly the same. And can't guarantee that, obviously, but you know, that would be ideal, obviously, and you could get your construction type 3 grant in next year.
Sure. And then
At this
project two,
point, it would, you know, it's going to take most of the rest of the year, you know, to develop that plan and submit it and get it reviewed, and you know, so it's going to put
Sure.
you close to that time frame anyway.
Okay, and then project two, is there a limit on how many I could submit for a dam for the study if I have multiple issues?
No, so a limit to the dollar quantity or a limit into the application number or both?
Okay,
Or yeah, so I don't think there's you can submit multiple applications and yeah, I don't think there's any limit on the amount of funds we disperse to any one grantee.
but then project three, there's only one application per dam, correct? For repairs?
Correct. For project type 3, only one per applicant.
Yeah, so you'd need to get them all, everything you wanted to do together between now and the next applicant or alteration
Okay.
permit submission deadline, and then you know do it all in one fell swoop in one project. But you know, you could do the third year if you missed something that wasn't finalized. You know, you could include it on another application the following year.
Okay, perfect.
That makes sense. Okay.
Sorry, I'm just changing the slides to show the type 3 application.
Was that generally correct what I just said, Jake?
Yes, I agree with everything you
Concerning
just said.
multiple items. Okay. It can be multiple items, but it needs to be in the same application. Is my understanding.
For type 3, yes, yeah.
I think, yeah, on that next page near the top, it mentions one application per dam. And I take that as meaning this or per grant cycle year, correct?
Correct,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, yeah.
Not in some.
So yeah, if your plan, let's say you had a plan submitted before January 15th this year that, you know, included, you know, repairing your primary spillway and modifying your auxiliary, that'd be two separate items, and those would be considered together as part of that one plan. Because a lot of these things go hand in hand. We really can't separate them out. Or we can, but it just would, yeah.
Yeah, I have a question kind of along the same lines. So I have a small privately owned dam that I currently have a PE doing survey work and getting elevations and getting a plan together for repairing like a spillway pipe. But I mean, we plan on having, you know, all that done, plans back to us and a contractor by this year. Like I'm trying to figure out the differences between types 1, 2, and 3 because it's all kind of in the same process in my mind.
So do you have an inundation study? A
I
hazard
think,
classification yet?
yeah. So I reached out to DCR a couple months ago or so, and was basically told it's going to be a low hazard dam, and that I would qualify for the whatever the $2,000 one
Simplified.
is.
Okay, good. So you need to have that in hand, I believe, though, to be eligible for type 2. Is that right, Andrea? So I think right now you'd be in this phase, unless you can get that hazard classification finalized before the end of the month, which is pushing it, if I'm honest, and then getting a plan set to submit for type 2. I think for this go around, you're going to be in type 1, but you'd certainly be eligible for all 3 of those items. It sounds
Okay,
like.
so for this application cycle, I'd probably only be able to be reimbursed for any sort of like engineering costs, is what you're saying.
Yeah, so okay, so for the type 2, you have to have a PE inspection submitted, and you have to have a conditional O&M certificate application in and submitted. So if you haven't done those yet, that would need to be done. You can be reimbursed for any of the work, including survey, that goes towards the construction plans if it was done after July 1st of 2024. And probably what you're looking at is a type 2 project. If you know that you are going to do something to alter the spillway, and you're going to be putting together alteration plans for that. If you have a low hazard dam, you need to be able to pass the 100-year storm event. And so I think what Justin's getting at is, without that study being done, are you worried about the conveyance, or it's just in disrepair, the spillway?
The dam was built in the 60s, so it's just galvanized steel that's rusted out, and it's the
Oh,
spillway
okay.
kept falling
Yeah,
over.
yeah. Got it. Okay. So yeah, the type 2 project, that's what you're eligible for this year, and that's just going to be getting the plans together.
So then,
And
like,
anything needed to get the plans together, like the survey, if that was done within the last, however many months that is, that could be, you can be reimbursed for that.
yeah, I mean, I think they're working out there this week. So
Yeah, so that would be
what
eligible.
I would call the construction phase would be eligible for next year's grant cycle, then, I guess.
Exactly.
Okay, I didn't
Exactly.
realize that it was broken
Yeah.
up, segmented like that.
Yeah.
So Andrea, he can do type 2 without the inundation study?
I think so, because it sounded like,
Okay.
this may be a rehab job. It may be
Yeah.
in addition to that. But if you get the, if he got the simplified study done within the grant period, he would be okay. Yeah.
All right. Sorry about that. I didn't mean to step on
I
you.
think what you're talking about, it could be triggered in the type 3, right? Because if you get and Scott, maybe this is your question, to be reimbursed for the type 3, the construction grant, you have to be eligible to get a regular certificate. So I guess the situation you wouldn't want to get into is you replace the, corrugated metal, but you're still in a situation where your spillway conveyance is not adequate for a regular O&M certificate. Then you wouldn't get reimbursed for that construction, right? So you want to make sure you have everything in place, including your inundation study, to know exactly what hazard class you are and exactly what your spillway capacity needs to be. But I don't think he has to have that for the type 2.
You're
He
right.
just
You're
needs to be
right.
working towards it. Yeah.
Because type 2, yeah, DVIZ is including the type 2. I'm sorry. I completely spoke out of turn there.
Yeah, I've had actually Brenton Payne out here, so I'll just email him and figure out what we need to do.
I have a question on maybe a type 3. And I may have missed the answer on this. I was trying to get my chat going. That didn't happen, but I want to know, can we submit both the application for the EAP and the PMP, or does that have to be done separately?
Sorry, I'm just trying to relate that to project type 3.
Type 3, yeah.
So type 3 is the construction, the actual doing the work.
Yeah, we, basically what we need is the blade that contains the flow. I don't know the technical term for it, but
Okay.
that has to be replaced.
And you're asking if the PMP and the EAP are submitted separately?
Yes.
They are. And you may be eligible for some of these items in the other categories, though. Andrea could maybe speak to that. But yeah, so the EAP is a separate item than the PMP worksheet. So it sounds like you already have a dam break inundation zone study, right? It was just done prior to 2016.
Yes.
And you, okay. So yeah, so what you would need to do is do the PMP and see if anything changed for good or bad. And then based on that, you could, let's just say there are different options in the PMP. And option B would be you have an existing study and all your precipitation values decreased. So that would be good, and that would mean that your existing EAP is still valid.
Okay.
Sorry, your existing maps are still valid.
Okay.
So you just need to update your EAP. Now, if the PMP shows that you have significantly increased precipitation values, then you'd have to talk to your regional engineer about whether or not it's enough to warrant another dam break inundation zone study. Which, as I understand, if that would be the case, you would be eligible for that DBIS grant in type 2.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yes, it does.
But yeah, look into, it sounds like you're eligible for some type 2 activities too. So look into those for those other items that you may need.
Excellent.
I got another question. This might have got answered, but I just want to make sure I tell my company correct. So for type 3, if I got a conditional certificate, I cannot get reimbursed for type 3 if the repair don't make it a regular certificate?
No, sorry. That what it would do though is it would limit your maximum amount.
Gotcha.
So if we go back, okay, we're on the right page now. So
right.
If you did your project and you still had an expired EAP, or there was still another deficiency, whether it was structural or a regulatory component, and you weren't eligible for that regular certificate and were still under the conditional, then it cuts what you're eligible to receive in total in half, essentially.
Perfect. Yep, makes sense.
You see that?
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
Just wanted to make sure.
It would be ideally, obviously, especially if you have higher value plans, to make sure you're getting everything knocked out and you end up with that irregular certificate.
Yep.
So you're eligible for more. Or I guess you have to show in the application process that this project is going to give you that regular certificate, or that you're in. I'm not sure how you handle those things, Jake. If they still have a few outstanding items, maybe they're under a conditional certificate. I mean, would you grant approval, assuming that they would get a regular and finish those other things, and then obviously they have to show that at the end?
Yeah, we would just work with
okay.
the regional engineer to make sure that, if you all think that they're on the right track,
Gotcha.
we're
Gotcha.
good to go. Yeah.
Okay.
It's like Aaron put a question in the chat for the type 2 eligible activities, engineering and design. Can you include multiple design elements in one application? For example, spillway replacement and filter drain.
It's my understanding that you can, because it would all be in one alteration permit and one set of plans.
That sounds right to me as well.
And you can consolidate items that way.
Okay, and to clarify, so this would be the alteration permit would need to have been submitted by January for this application cycle?
For type 3 for construction. If you're
just for type 3.
Yeah, if you're applying to do all of the things required for the alteration permit for the type 2, that's not required. But you do need to have an application for a conditional certificate in if you don't have a current one. And you have to have submitted a PE inspection if you don't have a current one.
Okay, thank you. That makes sense.
Who's next?
Yeah, if anyone has anything, feel free to come off mute, put in the chat, we'll hang around. But yeah, if you're all set, feel free to head out when you'd like, but we'll be here. I'm gonna come off sharing my screen just to drop that link to the resource folder in the chat, and then I'll put it back up.
Hello, my name is Jimmy. I have a question.
Go ahead, Jimmy.
So what if we're in the middle of a project that might qualify for a grant? Is there a retroactive date that we could, and we've already paid some invoices, but the project's not complete? Is there any recourse of trying to get money back for that? Or does this have to be all new stuff going forward?
Well,
We're in the design phase or construction?
It has to do with replacing flow meter and some repairs.
Do you have an approved alteration permit?
I'd have to double check.
Okay.
Well, any costs that were incurred following July 1st, 2024 are eligible for this grant round. So if they occurred prior to July, or sorry, following July this past year, you could apply for them retroactively.
Okay, thank you.
Provided you had an approved permit if you're talking about doing something that requires one on the ground.
Gotcha.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, there's the link to the resource file in the chat for anyone who wanted it.
This PowerPoint, it'll be emailed to all attendees, is that correct?
Yep, I'll send the slides, and I can also send out a recording if that's helpful.
Perfect, thank you.
Maybe I'll give my last call for questions at 12:40 unless anyone has something they're thinking about. Okay, well, it's 12:40. I don't see any other questions that we haven't addressed in the chat. So if anyone has anything last minute, feel free to come off mute. But otherwise, thank you so much for coming today. I hope it was helpful. Again, we'll send out the slides and the recording, and then you have our contact information. If you need any questions, we're happy to set up a call, whether it's with the grants team to talk application materials or with your regional engineer to talk technical questions. So don't hesitate to reach out. The easiest way for any questions is dam@dcr.virginia.gov. We can route you to the correct person from there. So thanks again, everyone. And thank you to our presenters.